This is the story of my adventure in lobby days. We were ready by 5 a.m. and decided to hit the road before we would be stuck in LA traffic. My friends Gail and Hong rode in my car, while Marissa, Pam, Luis, and Amy rode in the other car. It took us approximately 6 hours to get to Sacramento. This is us getting to the Radisson Hotel on Sunday, which is the day we had the orientation and workshop for lobbying. We didn't quite ride a bus. Instead, we walked. But as we were walking, we noticed a lot of buses parked outside the hotel, and we eventually talked about renting a bus next year for lobby days. It was a bit intimidating to see all the buses because it almost felt as if it was a representation and a symbol of power and unity from the other colleges. As we walked into the hotel and registered, we couldn't help but notice that all of the student volunteers were USC students. That's odd, I thought. As we proceeded towards the hall, we noticed a lot of the schools had already arrived and were sitting down with their cohorts wearing their school gear. We noticed a few empty tables that had burgundy and gold pom-poms. It appeared as if they were reserved. Our friend Brittany asked one of the staff members in charge of lobby days if schools were allowed to reserve tables. His answer was no, and that it was on a first-come, first-served basis. So off we went to sit on the tables that were supposedly reserved for the Trojans. As I walked towards the table, I made a comment out loud and said, why do people have these here, referring to the USC pom-poms? A USC student answered in a quite unpleasant tone of voice. She said, can't you see these are USC colors? Hello? I didn't say anything because I was in total shock. How could a social worker answer that way with such attitude and unfriendliness? I decided to sit elsewhere, but couldn't help wonder how much I wanted to go back and defend myself for the rude comment she made. My friend Pam noticed how disturbed I was and offered some advice. Her kind words helped bring down my anxiety. During the orientation, the MC announced every school present, and it felt like a pep rally. Schools were coming up with their own cheers and waving their banners up in the air. As we continued hearing the obnoxious cheers from the other schools, the students at Dominguez Hills decided that next year we would be well prepared and represent our school. At that point, our buddy Hong decided he would run for GASO president in hopes of creating unity amongst the entire CSUDH MSW cohorts. We thought it was an excellent idea. As our orientation began, we had various speakers talk about the 3 bills we would be advocating in favor of. The first bill was AB 12, which is to fine people who are paying for sexual services of a minor. These adults would have to pay a fine of $25,000 instead of the current $5,000 fine. A shocking fact is that more than 300,000 American children are sold for sex. With the fine being increased, the money would be used towards the Victims Witness Assistance Fund. Bill 671 would require all supervisors in child welfare services to have an MSW or a master's degree in behavioral science. At the moment, there is no educational requirement for supervisors, and this bill would ensure supervisors to have adequate master training and skills to provide the best services in the field of social work. Last but not least, Bill 130 and 131 would allow undocumented students to pay in-state tuition and receive financial aid. Each year there are about 24,000 students, if not more, graduating from high school and planning on pursuing a higher education, but are unable because of lack of financial assistance and citizenship. The speakers went over the 101 of lobby days and provided tactful strategies to battle the legislators. After an exhausting day of training, we needed a break and went to mingle with the rest of the social work toros. After all, it is about self-care, and what better than to down a bottle of Merlot. We left after I started noticing I was slurring my words. We stayed up practicing the speeches we were going to deliver to the legislators, and then eventually passed out. After a good night rest, I began getting ready for the big day. Oh, there I was in front of 25 people presenting my argument in favor of the DREAM Act. Governor Jerry Brown was supposed to be present, but instead, his aide was representing him. I was a nervous wreck, but I began my speech, and it read, The Imperial County is my home and also the home to hundreds of migrant farm working families who are undocumented and come to the USA in hopes that their children will live in a different life and pursue a higher education. As migrant students, my friends had to travel throughout California and work in the fields. They worked in harsh weather conditions, all to provide extra income for their families. Their dreams were to become lawyers, doctors, astronauts, as most children wish for. But as my friends grew older and began thinking about attending college, they were confronted with the fact they would not be eligible for financial aid. If their parents could barely afford to put food on the table, how were they to pay $50,000 out of pocket for school? At that point, their dreams were put to a stop. If you could support Bill 130 and 131, undocumented students will have a chance to pursue a higher education without creating a financial burden in their lives. As I finished my speech, I went into a very, very dark place as the governor's aide addressed the issue of California's budget and mentioned that a portion of education funds was going to be cut, therefore there was not enough money to accommodate every student in California. I was rejected. It was a very devastating moment, but my intuition told me that in this field of social work, I was going to have many dreadful moments where I would be confronted with my worst enemies, but at the end, it would all be worth it. Afterwards, we went to the social action rally, where the MC, a USC student and bully, forgot to call on Dominguez Hills when she was acknowledging the schools that were present at the rally. We cheered and yelled at the top of our lungs, Dominguez Hills! Dominguez Hills! But nothing, no one heard us. It was so degrading not to hear our school be called out. Now, it was a truly joyful experience because it brought together the MSW Toros. What did I learn from this experience? I learned that next year, Dominguez Hills will be recognized by the other schools of social work. We will dominate the orientation as well as the rally. We will create justice and will be recognized for our tremendous efforts in helping the marginalized groups in our communities. The adrenaline rush and energy that was built up during our Lobby Day weekend will continue throughout the year in an effort to ensure no one forgets who the Toros are. And off we went in pursuit of justice and some sleep. The end.